In 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet stating that the freedoms of man can only be maintained by limiting the power of government. The pamphlet was called Common Sense, and today it still is common sense.
I'm Mark Zaccaria.
I'm Lynn Hopkins. This is Common Sense. Welcome back. Have you tuned in to get our prescription for the cure to the malady known as opaque government? We've got that for you, coming right up. Speaking of political health, Rhode Island's Unified Health Infrastructure Project went live this month and was immediately unable to perform its intended function, issuing entitlement checks. So the poor got poorer and no one seemed to be at fault. Want to know what kind of games they're playing with UHIP? Then stay tuned. Finally, we will analyze the dirty little secret behind the aggressive attempts by disgraced Providence Councilman Kevin Jackson to stave off a recall petition. On this week's edition of Common Sense, Mark will take us to the headquarters of the Rhode Island Truckers Association, where he will conduct an in-depth interview with its president, Chris Maxwell. They will go into the campaign being mounted by that industry to oppose truck tolling to fund the Roadworks program. In between segments of that detailed briefing, Mark and I will pop back in to ask our show's signature question, "Are you kidding me?" So stay tuned for that political satire too. Finally, commentator Jeff Rashad will conclude this week's offering with his wise and witty take on sick leave. So let's get this show on the road with some of that aforementioned news analysis. Mark?
Thanks, Lynn. Lots of our elected officials talk often about transparency. Too often, though, we later find they were camouflaging hidden agendas all the while. Perhaps they don't get the concept because they've never sought or even had any transparency from their suppliers of political grist for the mill. Earlier this month, we brought you the story of Governor Raimondo's vote to award millions in tax credits to West Coast developer Lance Robbins. Neither she nor her staff looked into Mr. Robbins' credentials too deeply, but Kate Nagel of Go Local Prov did. After one Google search, she found that a California tenant advocacy group referred to Robbins as the worst slumlord in LA history. So the governor and her commerce secretary, Mr. Pryor, suddenly found they have one more fire to fight before any renovation can be started in Pawtucket. They were victims of a lack of transparency. Now comes Providence Mayor Jorge Elorza. The city's Parks Department recently issued a multi-million-dollar service contract to manage Water Place Park. The mayor, as chair of the Board of Contract and Supply, voted yay on this one. There were smiles all around as principals of the awardee held presses to extol the bright future of the crown jewel of the capital's park system. It didn't take Go Local Prov very long to run down the identity of one of the more prominent investors, David Pontarelli. His name may strike a chord of familiarity among good government types, but for a bad reason. In 2012, Mr. Pontarelli was fired from his position as fiscal advisor to the city's Department of Public Works. Do you know what you have to do to get outright fired from a public sector job in these parts? In Pontarelli's case, city HR records document that he was a no-show for his job, he appropriated city property for use at a nightclub he also managed, and, perhaps worst of all, he was the subject of a Target 12 investigation and TV expose. Then Mayor Angel Tavares was quoted as having been outraged and shocked by the public airing of this dirty laundry, and the offender had to go. Well, now, Pontarelli's back, and Elorza's got him. There may be no irregularities in the contractor's future. He may be here to make amends, as well as some money, of course. The problem for Mayor Elorza was the public embarrassment of having these details brought to light before the new Water Place Park management has had any time to prove itself. The real problem was that, like the governor before him, the mayor was outed as having been the victim of a lack of transparency. Her Excellency the Governor and His Honor the Mayor now know what it feels like to be seduced and abandoned by those in whom they've placed trust. Let's hope they'll remember the feeling next time they're tempted to whitewash some little problem. Sunlight keeps political problems in their proper proportion. In the dark, however, they just grow and grow. Lynn?
Thanks, Mark. We all play games. Traditionalists play chess or contract bridge in their parlors. The avant-garde play Street Fighter V on their computers. In any of those contests, players are assured of a reset if the need be. Shuffle the cards and deal again, hit the start over command, and it's a new day. It seems that the administration of Governor Gina Raimondo has treated the development and commissioning of their new Unified Health Infrastructure Project, or UHIP, as a game. And up until now, they've always been able to get a new life when something went wrong. That's probably why the project was years overdue and hundreds of % over budget. What's different now? Well, when they went live with the current version of UHIP and it didn't work, the neediest of Rhode Islanders promptly stopped getting their checks. That's a problem the gamers in the administration don't understand. To them, the amounts of the individual checks are small, sometimes under $100. They have no idea what it means to citizens who absolutely depend on those few bucks to make ends meet. So when UHIP managers casually estimated that they have everything working within 8 to 10 weeks, they were probably surprised at the political firestorm that followed. It must have sunk in, though. The State House of Representatives, currently out of session and on the campaign trail, immediately rescheduled oversight hearings to haul the gamers in front of the cameras for a public whipping. A week ago, at the joint hearing of the House Oversight and House Finance Committees, they came face to face with some of the clients they'd driven broke. No doubt, today's developers and UHIP managers have retreated to their inner sanctum to get back to work. Let's hope that the legislatures who subpoenaed them really understand that this is not a game, so they keep the pressure on, even after next week's election. Mark?
Thanks again, Lynn. There is more going on in Providence than just the issuance of questionable contracts. Voters in Ward 3 on the east side are being treated to the drama of a recall attempt being mounted against their sitting city councilor, Kevin Jackson. Jackson is in the middle of a 4-year term. The former collegiate track coach is also under indictment for embezzling funds from the Providence Cobras, a local youth track and field team, for which he had been volunteer coach. Citing innocence until guilt is proven, the embattled councilman is fighting the recall petition, actually slow-walking his responses to a lawsuit he himself filed to block it. It's all part of a curious game of parliamentary maneuvering based on the rules of recall in the capital city. It turns out that once a notice of recall is filed, a first petition is issued which must be returned with 300 voter signatures from the ward in order to show support for the actual recall. After that filing, the actual recall petition is issued by the Board of Canvassers. That one needs 2,000 signatures to actually effect the recall and pave the way for a special election. Does Councilman Jackson think he can beat the indictment and return victorious to serve out his term? Knowledgeable observers of Providence politics don't think so. They believe he will go to trial and be found guilty. So why the fight over recall? It turns out that the single best day to get 2,000 valid voter signatures in Ward 3 would be Election Day 2016. Jackson's lawsuit against the recall petition was likely filed solely for purposes of dragging things out until at least November 9th. After that, a door-to-door campaign for signatures among houses with security systems and reclusive residents would require massive effort and considerable good luck in order to succeed within the 90 days allotted. If the recall petition fails to get the required signatures, Mr. Jackson retains his seat and its $20,000 paycheck, at least until a conviction. That could easily be after the 2018 election. In other words, it's all about the cash. Councilman Jackson is defending his sole source of income now that he's been released from his college job due to the criminal action. Meanwhile, waiting in the wings is Marcus Mitchell, the the well-known East Side resident, currently chairs the Providence Community Library System. In 2014, he led Mr. Jackson for the council seat on election night as a write-in candidate. Mail ballots that were counted the next day gave the race to the incumbent by a narrow margin. There are few, if any, write-in votes on mail ballots. It seems that Mr. Mitchell will easily win any special election that's called. There have been no Republican candidates in Ward 3 for the last 2 cycles. Still, it looks like the citizens of the east side of Providence will be effectively without representation on the city council until the next election, and all because Kevin Jackson needs that government check more than he needs to be of one last service to his community. Lynn?
Thanks, Mark. It seems there are gamers everywhere we look here in Little Rhodey. Folks, it is almost time to move on to the first segment of Mark's in-depth interview with Rhode Island Trucking Association President Chris Maxwell. Just before we do, though, please stand by. No need to readjust your set. What's coming up next is a tongue-in-cheek look at the Ocean State political scene. Are you kidding me? The U.S. and Canada share the longest undefended border in the world. We are friends across the back fence, sure. We trade good-natured barbs once in a while, but for every time a Yank refers to Canada as the 51st state, there's a hoser referencing us as the 13th province. So I guess it stands to reason that our neighbors in the Great White North would feel sorry for us now and then and try to soothe our frayed spirits. Did you know they are sending us some of that sympathy right now? Are you kidding me? Yup. Our kindly kin to the north look down on what they see as the disaster of our presidential election, and they figure we must all be in pain, if only from the embarrassment. So they are taking to social media to try and lift our spirits in this time of depression and angst. Under the Twitter hashtag, Tell America It's Great, empathetic Canadians have been flooding the blogosphere with compliments on American culture, music, customs, and technology. They've even complimented the Red Sox on beating the Blue Jays. That had to have hurt. And they've suggested an appropriate reply. Hashtag, Tell Canada Thanks. Ah. According to the Associated Press, it's all the brainchild of a Toronto ad agency named The Garden Collective. The firm calls the initiative a pet project intended only to spread the love. That, according to Managing Director Dickie Dickerson. And was there ever a more quintessential Canadian name? Turns out the company was only organized 18 months ago, and that having this hashtag go viral has really put them on the map. In other words, in addition to offering their sincerest sympathies for our mass insanity, they are also quite happy to make some money off the situation. Hey, hoser! Are you kidding me?
I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense. Welcome back. This is the program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life and come up with common sense solutions. I'm thrilled to be able to be here today in the offices of the Rhode Island Trucking Association with its president, Chris Maxwell. Chris, thank you very much for joining us.
Mark, great to be here. Great to have you here and in our beautiful headquarters on Roosevelt Avenue. We have a little museum of sorts here. We'll give you a little tour afterwards.
I look forward to that right afterwards. But first, tell our viewers a little bit about the Trucking Association, yourself, and set the scene.
I've been at the helm of the Trucking Association for 5 years. Prior to that, I was a board member of RETA, representing actually D'Amber Construction in Warwick, where I worked for 25 years. So I'm very familiar not only with the contracting, heavy highway aspect of the trucking industry, but more so now with the all facets of trucking. You know, the freight, the heavy highway, all of those things that go into it. So my experience, 25 years. You know, I've incorporated that into this role again over the last 5 years. The Rhode Island Trucking Association was established in 1931. We celebrate 85 years this year. We'll have a dinner at Twin River Casino on November 15th. We'll entertain about 450 guests. Some of the folks, leadership from ATA will be up, and I mentioned ATA. We are the Rhode Island affiliate of the ATA Federation. There are 50 state trucking associations.
ATA being the American
Trucking Associations in Washington, D.C., and we are the exclusive Rhode Island affiliate. And as people have heard, the Rhode Island Trucking Association and the ATA very well in step together on local issues.
So it's safe to say you are a key representative of the trucking industry here in Rhode Island.
Absolutely, yes.
And tell us a little bit about the trucking industry in Rhode Island. What kinds of products are delivered by trucks?
Rhode Island is essentially as dependent as any state, probably as Hawaii is, if you will, for movement of trucks throughout. So we, you've heard us say, if you eat it, drink it, wear it, watch it, drive it, it came on truck. Trucks move just about 85% of goods and services throughout the state of Rhode Island. So we're very, very heavily dependent on trucks, more so than most states.
And it's virtually all private industry. It is a private business. Lots of entrepreneurial trucking companies, a few of the larger ones, obviously.
Correct.
But everyone is in it to be efficient with the use of their resources.
Well, most of our trucking companies here, we have about 500 members here at RITA. The primary thrust of our membership are private carriers, local businesses who, by virtue of federal motor carrier safety regulations and the trucks that they operate, are deemed motor carriers. So your supermarkets, your contractors, your landscapers, just about all the entities and businesses throughout Rhode Island that you see are trucking companies and private carriers. And then we have, obviously, we have our for-hire carriers. We have a midsection, if you will, of our membership that are 40, 50 truck private carriers that travel through and outside our state. Then we have our less than load, a lot of those carriers, your UPS, FedEx that transport primarily packages and smaller loads. So there's a diverse lot of trucking entities, both private and for hire, throughout the state of Rhode Island, and they basically drive our economy.
Talk to me, if you will, about some of the equipment advances that have happened just over the last 10 or 15 years, the safety issues.
Well, safety, the trucking industry as a whole spends about $7 to $8 billion a year in safety advances. Trucks are, we're actually at conferences now talking about what's called platooning. Eventually trucks will actually lock into one another and they'll platoon, and this probably isn't going to happen so much in the northeast, but out Midwest, for instance, Volvo Trucks is already out in Nevada looking at platooning of trucks, where basically trucks will link up and they'll almost magnetically be in sync with one another. So you may have 3, 4, 5 trucks platooning together that are connected, and the lead truck will essentially be driving and providing the braking and all that stuff. And that essentially is to make us more efficient as an industry, move goods and services that much quicker and more efficiently. Locally, we see advances now that most trucks are essentially governed by they're going to be, and many are now, what they call electronic logging devices. And that's going to take place in December of 2017, where most of all carriers are going to have electronic logs, which is going to dictate the number of hours that a driver can work for a given day and a given week. So that's really one of the things that's coming to play. Trucks are essentially really becoming technological devices where the truck is essentially talking to the driver. Case in point, when they hit inspection stations, what they call as bypasses. Trucks now, if they have a favorable carrier rating in terms of safety, they can essentially get a bypass through a weigh station because they've proven their worth to be able to get up to a 90% plus bypass rate. So technology drives our industry.
And those weigh stations, if I may, are there at least in part to be sure that nobody's overloading, that there's not excessive wear and tear on the highway.
Yeah.
So trucks really are not responsible for a lot of excessive wear and tear, are
Well,
they?
trucks now, that there's a myth in terms of this debate here. I approached the state police locally, because we were looking for revenue streams to fund our infrastructure. I said, hey, we have right now portable scales in Rhode Island. I broached the subject of, hey, should we get a full-time scale here to drum up revenue? And the answer from the commercial enforcement unit was simply, there's no money in truck overweights. Trucks are not, the over-the-road trucks that are being targeted, especially in roadworks, and I'm sure we'll get to that topic, are not traveling overweight. Primarily the trucks traveling overweight are local carriers working legally now, not illegally, on a state-issued overweight permit. But most trucks going over the road are traveling either less than load with a small component, a machine, or they call what they cube out, with a lot of materials but very light, styrofoam and packages.
So trucks are safe. Trucks are not an excessive wear and tear on the
Correct.
roads that we have today.
Our roads are designed to carry trucks, if they're maintained properly.
How much does it cost the average Rhode Island trucker to register a truck and operate it, in terms of the revenue to the state?
Operations are obviously dependent upon where they travel and their fuel, but given registration fees and taxes annually, it's many thousands of dollars, and we pay locally in Rhode Island, trucking pays 6% of the fees for road repairs and maintenance, yet we only travel 5% of the cumulative mileage. So we're paying our fair share and then some, and we've already agreed that we would be willing to pay more in lieu of doing tolls.
If it could be done in some simple way. So that kind of sets the stage for us, Chris.
Yeah.
In just a minute, we're going to have to take a break.
Yeah.
But when we come back after that, we'll talk a little bit more about how the trucking industry tried to participate with the development of the roadworks project and how that went in the long run.
Very good.
But right now, ladies and gentlemen, I have reason to believe that someone is about to ask the question, are you kidding me? We all love political polling, don't we? We quietly crave being told what we think by others. Hey, it's science, not simply emotion, and that means it's always exactly accurate, right? Are you kidding me? Allow me to disabuse you of that misapprehension. Last week, the results of a UMass Lowell Odyssey Millennials survey came out. 1,247 American adults were interviewed. Their ages ranged from 18 to 35. 966 were registered voters, 680 of which were classified as likely voters. This group was asked to rate their preference between 5 choices. Clinton wins, Trump wins, a national lottery selects the president from all Americans, Obama appoints himself president for life, or a giant meteor hits the earth. The results? Millennials preferred a mass extinction event to the election of either of the major party candidates. Okay, stick a pin in your eye if you must, but please don't include me in that. To be fair, each of the patently unconstitutional options for selecting the next president did rate higher than death by meteor. Still, I'd have to question the veracity of this poll. I'm willing to bet that as the giant asteroid hit our upper atmosphere and began sending white-hot shockwaves down on us, most millennials would quickly ask for a recount. There's a reason we refer to October of an election year as the silly season. For millennials at least, it appears from these results that sheer fatigue with the process has now superseded fear, sarcasm, and ridicule. Are you kidding me? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense, and we're here today in the headquarters of the Rhode Island Trucking Association with its president, Chris Maxwell. Chris, thanks for having us again. In our last segment, we talked a lot about what trucks are, what they mean to Rhode Island, how safe and easy on the roadways. I mean, our roads are built for trucks, that's what you said.
Yes.
And how much they actually pay if maintained properly.
Yes.
We're going to get to that because now we're going to talk about the roadworks plan.
Yeah, sure.
As the current legislation was evolving over a year ago, you were intimately involved with the legislature, trying to lobby them, trying to explain to them, were you not?
Well, we were to an extent. I have to go back to May of 2015 when prior to that, during Governor Raimondo's run for election, she sat right where we are sitting right now. and met with our board of directors, and we made it very clear that we wanted to be part of the solution for the state. We go to Washington to call on Washington with our state legislators, our senators and our congressmen, and do the same. Trucking wants to pay more money, we'll be part of the solution. We do pay, we're willing to pay more because the roads are our offices. So we made it clear to the governor that we want to be part of the solution. So it was to our chagrin and our surprise that on May 27th to 28th of 2015, without any sort of conversation, roadworks was rolled out. We obviously tried to make those at the State House, the decision makers, namely the Speaker, and some of the finance folks, privy to the fact that we do pay through fuel taxes, through excise taxes on things like tires, through apportionment of registration fees, a number of things that we do pay, as I said before, 26% plus of the rates. In the case of roadworks, we felt that we would increase our diesel tax, which we, as many of our members have said, we could manage fuel, and we felt a 19% diesel tax cumulatively could give us somewhere in the $12 to $15 million a year toward infrastructure improvement, and combine that with a number of other areas and revenue sources that we thought we could attain in existing revenue sources, and since then hundreds of millions of dollars that are coming in through Senator Reid's initiatives and efforts, and we applaud him for that we didn't need to do tolling. But the message we got back at the State House was, it was like hitting your head against the wall. It's not enough what you're giving us. It's not enough what you're giving us. And our numbers, our own numbers in-house that we got from the state's tax payment numbers on diesel, the ATRI numbers, the American Transportation Research Institute's numbers, showed that there was a vast overstatement of the mileage. So we felt that the governor's plan, roadworks, and the $46 million that they hoped to gain every year from trucking was vastly overstated. We were looking at their plan more like a $20 million revenue stream. That's before diversion. We all know that diversion off roads and around Rhode Island could have put a much more of a dent than that. So we figured $12 million to $15 million against a realistic $20 million from their tolling was a pretty good start. But as we sat there with Speaker Mattiello and other folks and said, this is a really good start and it's far more realistic, we would hear time and time again, it's not enough. And we would say, you're comparing enough to $46 million. $46 million is unattainable, it's pie in the sky, and whoever's telling you that is outright lying. We're giving you real numbers, real revenue on real data. I just spoke to my counterpart from UPS, and he said to me, imagine how much money, if they'd come to us in the first month of Gina Raimondo's governance and said to us, we need to work with you guys on this. Think of how many millions of diesel could have been taxed already, and think of the money that could have already been going to our bridges. Instead, they've picked a fight with the most powerful industry there is, and as Chris Spear, our leader in ATA, said, we will not abandon this until we stop it. We will not abandon our fight until this is stopped.
So it sounds like they weren't listening to reason or the hard numbers you were putting in front of them.
They didn't want to know. They didn't want to know, and they still don't want to know the truth. Everything they repress information, they manipulate information, and as we will prove time and time again, and we still will be proving some factors, that they do not in fact vet the numbers. They don't care about the numbers because, as somebody very wisely stated, roadworks succeeds by failing. And what I mean by that is, once the shortfalls that I've mentioned before are realized, inevitably they will have to create other revenue streams. So all the businesses that they told we're going to carve out the class 6 and 7 trucks, let me tell you, 6 and 7s are going to be the first ones they migrate back in. And then they will start adjusting the tolls up, which will further impact diversion and the cost of our goods and services. And then you're going to have, on top of that, you have legal challenges. Inevitably, it succeeds in that everyone gets told when the big bad trucking industry eventually beats it, and they inevitably have the infrastructure up, and they say, well, we got to do it now. We're neck high in this thing. We can't turn around. I think realistically, Mark, I think that most of the people that supported this in retrospect, would like to run away from it now, but they're too far in to do this. And I think 5 years from now, we'll be looking at that much like many of the problems that we have in the state, where they do not actually vet the numbers, whether it's 38 studios or anything. We do not. Len Ladaro, the economist from URI, said to me personally, we do not exercise any oversight or due diligence. We didn't do it with 38 studios. We haven't done it with anything. And here now, we haven't done it with roadworks, and it is going to come back to bite us exponentially more damaging than anything we've done in the past. And unfortunately, this is the gift that we'll keep giving to our citizens, because they will pay tolls, and they will pay tolls for their cars, and they will also pay tolls for all the products and services. So this is yet another double taxation. Tolls are simply a veiled tax.
Chris, it sounds like there was an ulterior motive all the way along, and they were reverse engineering with this $46 million figure.
Right.
They had to start with that figure. They had to come to that somehow.
Well, they put this out in such a hasty fashion that they wanted to get it out there, and they wanted to put it out there just like Cooler Warmer, just like the Health and Human Services. They want to rush to things without any oversight and due diligence. So what they did is they put this out there with glowingly wonderful numbers, and then once they met their match in our figures in our industry, they had to back into it. They had to back into a number of their estimates, and that has again proven to me to be extremely disheartening. That we're not doing our diligence to get the numbers beforehand. We're getting numbers, and then we're backing into them.
But it almost seems like their ultimate objective was to get those gantries up, and that's going to be $40 to $70 million.
It still is.
And once we've paid that money, ladies and gentlemen, we have to use them, and so that's how they get.
The main goal here is to get the gantries up and running, and then worry about it later on.
So the tolling of all traffic, or at least the monitoring of all traffic, was the goal to begin with? Would you say
I
that?
think there's a bigger goal here. I think overall there's a bigger goal here. There's no way they would be, based on the information and the pushback and the opposition, there's no way they could still be continuing with this program if there wasn't a greater payoff down the road that we'll unfortunately find out someday about that.
And the suggestion is clear from the fact that you were making logical suggestions of exactly where money could come from and how it would be and what kind of levels you could expect from existing operations.
Right.
And
real numbers.
And they were
real
growing.
numbers. 1% to administrative cost on gas and diesel, somewhere 20 to 30% out the window before you even hit the infrastructure on tolling. It's the most inefficient way to fund our roads. Some do fund their roads that way, parkways, turnpikes, some bridges, but you don't double dip and fund the interstate that's already getting funds with a toll. That's prohibited for a reason.
So I guess it's fair to say you were pretty surprised last February when they just passed it like that.
Yeah, well, we weren't surprised. We kind of knew that either those folks that were supporting it were afraid to support it, or they were just, we all know what happened there. Unfortunately, democracy was crushed.
With that, Chris, we're going to take another break. We'll have another interlude of a little bit of political sarcasm from here in Rhode Island. Yes, we're about to ask the question again, are you kidding me?
Sadly, there is a long and inglorious history of Rhode Island voters simply approving of any bonding or financing measures they find on the Election Day ballot. So it should be even more urgent warning that the legislature still tried to sneak one through on us this time. Are you kidding me? I'm not. So this has to mean the funding is even more shaky than usual. What am I talking about? Why the $20 million in bonding for expansion at the Port of Providence, or Provport? And by the way, these are to be general obligation bonds. They're the ones we really do have to pay back. The problem with the proposal is that it's really short on detail. From one aerial photo with a plot line overlay on the Provport website, it looks like they mean to buy the big scrap iron pile on Allens Avenue. That's an EPA Superfund site, folks. There's no way to estimate how much it might cost to clean that up. So remind me why we're letting the present owners off the hook by taking title? See what I mean about shakier than usual? That's why they linked this dog to the funding request for Quonset Point for pier renovation. Quonset is a reasonably well-run quasi-public. Everyone knows the park now employs some 10,000 workers in a wide range of capacities. Clearly, the framers of this ballot question felt that Quonset's request would be good camouflage for Provport's. Sorry, Charlie. If the money is used to buy up responsibility for a heavy metals disaster on the waterfront, it will make 38 studios look like a day at the beach. But not that beach. Hey, wake up and vote no on question 5. Are you kidding me?
Folks, I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense. Welcome back. I'm here, as you know, with Chris Maxwell, president of the Rhode Island Trucking Association, and we're talking about how the trucking industry attempted to assist the state in creating a revenue stream that would help with road and bridge repair, and how that ultimately failed, apparently because of some ulterior motives. Chris, in our last segment, you mentioned something about the word diversion. Could you just briefly explain to our audience what that is?
Well, diversion is the act of, in the case of the trucking industry, they will divert their route to a path of lesser resistance. It's like water. Some will say trucking is like water. It will find the path of least resistance. Diversion means that the trucks will choose a different route. In this case, Rhode Island not being part of the corridor is not an essential route, so trucks that are already paying quite a bit of money to this state are not going to come through this state. It means they're going to go up 395, a couple of miles longer, $11 in tolls versus 20. So essentially, I said this to somebody the other day, truck drivers aren't even going to make the decisions anymore. It's going to either be a company policy or it's going to be an ELD that I mentioned earlier saying toll road ahead, divert 395 to 90. So the technology is actually going to start driving this diversion. Diversion means you're going around. So in this case, they're going to go around Rhode Island, or they're going to divert off the interstate to secondary roads to beat the toll, or to do the delivery.
In your opinion, then, the Rhode Island legislature and the administration haven't quite realized that this is going to happen. They think I got X number of trucks today, I'll have X number of trucks 2 years from now. Trucks
will, and again, if this is an economic issue, it's certainly in the case of Rhode Island going to be a protest issue. This is a nationwide, the white hot spotlight is on Rhode Island, and the trucking industry is not very happy with this.
Once again, we're a petri dish for the rest of the
nation.
Yes, we are. Yes. Listen, you mentioned protest a minute ago, and of course, since the legislation went through and it was a done deal, and you were disappointed in it, you've obviously not just sat down and said, well, that's that. You've been working hard against it. Tell us a little bit about what happened next.
Well, I was told before the vote it's a done deal. I was told after the vote it was a done deal. I've been offered by friends bearing gifts and folks to let it go, come, we'll embrace you. There's great things for the trucking industry if you just move on from tolling. Never going to happen. I've been contacted by very prominent politicians who crushed bills at the end of the session last year that I had promises that we're going to make it through. Very, very, very strong bills nationally for trucking that had very little consequence here. I had almost solid assurances that that was going to pass. Well, somebody at the very end crushed that bill, and that person recently came back to me and said, if you stay out of this and back off from my election, I'll give you that, pass that bill, day number 1 of the session. It's that sort of nonsense that's going on that I refuse to cower to. These folks, we're not just protesting to bang our drum. We're not protesting just to make noise, to drive around and blow our horn. We're protesting because we feel we need to do this not only for the trucking industry, but for the citizens of Rhode Island. This is not, and by the way, we do intend to win. If we don't get a repeal locally, which we feel there is a formula for, we have one of the most powerful trade industries in Washington that does not lose. They intend to beat this. We may not be a huge sweeping win. It may be a series of very small victories that ultimately damage Rhode Island and beat this thing back. And as we said all along, at the end of the day, we control the routes and the trucking industry has the ultimate say and discretion as to where they're going to travel and what they're going to charge in Rhode Island. So, as we've said all along, Mark, we've already won this battle.
Sounds to me like, in addition to being injured, you've also been insulted.
Yeah,
and you're
yeah, I think
responding as a result of that emotional connection to it. Now, I think that the people of Rhode Island are looking in on this. Do you?
I certainly hope so. This is, Mark, if this issue, if tolling does not, I was asked at the rally the other day that you attended, and thank you, I was asked if if tolling is a number one issue. Tolling actually, this is more than just tolling. This tolling is number one, as we said before, a veiled tax. It's a gutless tax. Politicians that have guts look at you and say, I need to tax you. Gutless politicians put a veiled tax in and support that. Okay? In this case, that's what they've done here.
And so I think that what the people of Rhode Island are looking at is the tolling issue, and they
the
know it's
tolling
coming to
issue
them.
is a greater. The tolling issue represents everything that's wrong in Rhode Island. What the taxation, the way it was done. Governor Raimondo this morning on Gene Valicenti said how so horrified she was about Donald Trump mentioning that he will question the election, and that is a assault on our democracy. What was more of an assault on our democracy than the way roadworks was put through, and people were crushed? Some people voted their will of their constituents, some people were punished, and some people just went along, and some people actually abstained.
We're familiar with all of those cases.
That's about as cowardice as it gets.
Well, that said, the people of Rhode Island not only understand that they're being hurt by the tolling,
Right.
but they also see that process as emblematic of lots of other things that
That's
go
right.
on in the
That's correct.
in the State House.
You don't get anything done up there. Nothing gets done up there, and what gets done is what they want to get done, not what the people want to get
You
done.
mentioned
And
a
that's
minute ago.
disharmony. This is the time, the one-time mark in the history of Rhode Island. I've said before, Rhode Islanders are conditioned to accept it, to take, like, thank you, sir, may I have another? We're conditioned to take it. This is the one time where they have a fight, like they have a fight going on from my organization, the business community, but they have a partner in the American Trucking Associations, NATSO, who you saw the other day, the manufacturers. They're all jumping on, because as this plays out, this is not a good deal, and everybody's against it. So Rhode Islanders it starts November 8th. They have an opportunity this time. They have a powerful partner in the trucking industry that is now, for once, going to assist them in usurping the power base that has put us last in just about every category there is nationwide. This is their opportunity. If they blow it this time, I don't know what to tell the citizens of Rhode Island, other than they are conditioned beyond repair.
Well, you mentioned a moment ago about the rally that you conducted
Yes.
earlier this week.
Right.
And it took place at the state's only truck stop at Exit 5
That's
on
correct,
I-95.
Sure.
And tell me a little bit about why you did that, what you think you accomplished, and who else was there.
Well, I think that it certainly, again, drove the message that we are not, that this message 3 weeks out from the election, this is still a very, very huge topic. The press showed up en masse. That certainly meant something. That facility particularly, it shows that there's a coalition build, that the NATSO folks are on board against this, that they recognize that this will change the supply chain footprint and cost throughout the nation, and more so locally, the TA Petro stop, $8 million in taxes, investment, $2.5 million in taxes, 75 employed, but like they sweep it under the rug like it's a non-factor. So we wanted to call attention to that great facility.
NATSO, National Association of Travel Service Operators?
That's correct.
Okay,
Correct, yeah.
and just so you know, so that the truck stop is a travel service
Right,
location.
and that will go up in smoke. If truck tolling takes place, that facility will cease to exist because of the diversion. There will not be any business left.
If you take 10% of the business away by diversion, they're in big trouble.
Owner-operators, independent drivers said 76% of the owner-operators. That's
you
a
go.
big chunk. That's
Big
a
chunk.
huge chunk.
With that, let's take another break. Ladies and gentlemen, you have one more shot to answer the question, are you kidding me? Futurist and author Arthur C. Clarke famously remarked, two possibilities exist. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. Well, We may have been alone in the universe at one time, but today, if you're inclined to express yourself on Twitter, you're never alone, and your words will live on forever. Are you kidding me? Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has proved and reproved that axiom this election cycle. Now, gubernatorial chief of staff Brett Smiley has shown us the way once again. During the second presidential debate, Mr. Smiley unleashed an epithet-laced cascade of tweets. Ironically, the target of his vitriol was the aforementioned pioneer of the ill-chosen tweet, Donald J. Trump himself. There's a certain symmetry there, don't you think? Apparently, it was a slow enough news cycle that Mr. Smiley's tweet tirade drew some media attention. Governor Raimondo let him off the hook by suggesting that he was speaking for himself, not the administration. GOP state chair Brandon Bell let Smiley off the hook too. He told Go Local Prov, quote, "Who am I to say anything?" unquote. It may not be over for Smiley yet, though. The one player in this piece who has yet to weigh in on how he feels about Brett Smiley's comments is the GOP nominee himself. Hey, if he starts in on his Rhode Island adversary, then Mr. Smiley may find that he's bitten off more than he can chew. Are you kidding me? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense. Welcome back. We are now about to finish up with our interesting in-depth interview with Chris Maxwell, the president of the Rhode Island Trucking Association. And Chris, thank you again for hosting us and for taking time out of your schedule. We have been talking about the roadworks plan, some of the problems that you tried to engineer out of it beforehand, and that you're now trying to politic out of it.
Yeah.
If roadworks goes through as proposed, we understand that we're going to have big economic problems and lawsuits and so forth. If ATA and RITA succeed in suing and finding that differential tolling is not legal on federal highways, as I would strongly suspect it is not, then we're going to see tolling of everybody. That's a problem.
Well, if it succeeds by failing, I think inevitably the MOU that was paraded out there as a victory was nothing more than
memorandum of understanding
between Rhode Island and Federal Highway was really nothing more than a green light that if you meet the environmental impact studies, which are very, very daunting. They're not, there are a number of things. And it's not just environmental. It's pricing, it's congestion, it's how it affects certain low-income communities. So it's more than that. So it basically said if the plan meets the law for replacement and repair of bridges, if you cover or comply with the NEPA study. So that's for each of the locations. What it did not say is you can toll tractor trailers. It said basically you can toll. What is happening here is Rhode Island is choosing to toll tractor trailers. The feds essentially are saying every time I look at them, right at the highest levels of federal highway in Washington, can they toll tractor trailers? They can toll whoever they want. The feds are not smart enough not to embroil themselves in what they know will be a discriminatory tolling. It's like my kids when I punish them, and they threaten, I'm going to do this, and I say, you can do whatever you want, which means there are consequences. I think you read between the lines of Federal Highway saying, you can toll whoever you want, but that doesn't mean it's going to be legal, but we don't go there. We don't go there. That's for a court to decide, and I think ultimately that's going to play out. In the meantime, we've said repeal would be great. That would be the most wonderful way for us to save the state from this. Would save a lot of heartburn, a lot of legal fees, a lot of embarrassment. That has a small chance of happening, but there is a formula there. Beyond that, there will be a legal battle on one of probably a half a dozen fronts. That we could do a whole nother segment on. And we've got those teed up, and we've got specialists in Washington that are looking at those. Ultimately, we will challenge this. We would really, as we started out this whole conversation, we want to be a partner. We've been shut out from the conversation from day one. We continue to be shut out of the conversation. We wanted to debate DOT 2 weeks ago. They still don't want to sit down with us and debate this issue. It's non-negotiable. It's non-debatable. There's a larger agenda here, which is basically to come up with a revenue stream, as Peter Alviti said, to perpetuity. But this is not going to be just for roads and bridges, because once we take the eye off this, mind you, once we get tolls, we'll still be paying all the fees at the DMV that continue to escalate. We'll still be paying our gas tax. See, we don't get tolls to make things go away. We get tolls to give more money. Tolling to financing to perpetuity. This is to just create a government coffer of money to be able to do whatever they want on the backs of the working folks.
And it is money, if I may say, that
Yeah.
is removed from the productive economy.
Correct.
It's a tax.
It is. Tolling, if there's one thing you take from this, folks, tolling is taxing. Tolling is taxing. That is, so it's so disingenuous for you to have a legislator who voted for tolls to look you in the face and say that they are against taxes. They just voted for the biggest veiled tax that this state is ever going to see. It is a supply chain tax that's going to be attached to everything you live to run your business, that you used to run your business, to raise your children, and to operate your households. This is a veiled tax. Tolling is taxing.
And as proof, if I may, of that it is taxing and that it hurts the productive economy,
Yeah.
if that money, that $40 to $70 million that they're looking at, was in the hands of the truckers,
Right.
they would be in a position to do more of the kind of efficiency and
Oh,
safety things we
absolutely.
talk about up
Look,
front.
we're investing it anyway.
Sure.
Look, I've said it before. Roadworks is a cancer. Rhode Island, if you look at it, I'm being repetitive in some cases. I've said it before. Roadworks is 38 Studios was a benign cancer. It was a tumor that could be lumped off. It was a finite situation we can quantify. Roadworks is a malignant tumor that will metastasize. It will continue to grow. It will continue to morph. The rates will continue to grow. Classes will continue to be included as this implodes under its own misinformation, and it's inevitably going to be one of the greatest failures that this state has ever ushered in. But the folks, unfortunately, that ushered it in, the power base, will probably be gone. Hopefully, they'll be elected out, but as we know, most of them have greater visions for themselves, and they're going to leave a mess. They're going to leave scorched earth behind them. Unfortunately, the trucking industry as a whole, nationally, doesn't really care about Rhode Island. They're intent on burned and bloodying people, to make an example. So this does not happen. So when other states consider this, which, by the way, no other state's governor, no other states toll trucks only. They have a shared burden. No other trucks are doing it. Where they're doing it, they're peeling back, and they're pulling back on tolls, or they're eliminating them. Where they're doing it, in most cases, the New York Thruway. I had an interview with a reporter the other day. Well, they toll the parkways, they toll Massachusetts. I said, those are all funded on tolls, no federal money. So people really need to peel away the layers. It starts November 8th. If they voted for tolls, Mark, they need to go. That is the first step in us reclaiming the state and bringing it back to prosperity. That is I have people that I have great respect for, professionals I do business with, friends I grew up with who voted for it. I'm sorry, I like you, but it's not personal, it's business. They need to be voted out. That is a deal breaker. That's all you need to know about those folks if they voted for tolls.
One of the things that many of our listeners will remember is the No Tolls Bridgeworks plan that was promulgated before Roadworks was instituted, because Roadworks was, the titular reason for it was to be able to fix roads and bridges.
Right.
And the money actually existed, but as you yourself have said eloquently, they didn't want existing money, they wanted new money.
Yeah, and I think we also got to look at one other thing. You got to look at RIDOT. You got to look at its history. It's got a self-serving agenda. Its whole bridge inspection program really needs to be examined. It's completely subjective, as we saw with the 610. They took a 9-month-old inspection and waved it out as a critical need to repair the 610. They have the ultimate inspection, discretion on inspections. It's subjective. That needs to be looked at very, very closely.
So you're really doing the people of Rhode Island a service here by shining a light on the ulterior motives of some government activities, the ineptitude of some government activities, and the constant need for more and more new money because it really hurts the productive economy, which is where we all
Why not use them? Why not use the sources we already have? This did not have to happen. Roadworks did not have to happen, but unfortunately some people did not have the will to do an about face when they knew that the numbers did not match up. Hopefully after this election, there will be some brave souls that will combine to take it away on a repeal, to save this state an awful lot of harm, an awful lot of money, and an awful lot of embarrassment.
Chris, thank you very much for your time.
My
It's been a pleasure,
Likewise,
and maybe we'll check in with you in a few
Love to
months
come
to
back.
see what has happened
Absolutely.
and carry this story forward.
My pleasure. Thank you very
Ladies
much.
and gentlemen, we'll now wrap up with Jeff Richard and his commentary. Thank you very much.
The October 13th, 2016 Portsmouth, Rhode Island Times carried an editorial on its opinion page, which got my attention. Seems the esteemed governor of Massachusetts, Charlie Baker, is unhappy that state employee contracts allow the accruing of sick leave benefits, which can be cashed out upon retirement. The editorial suggests that Rhode Island should do something about its problem. Seems for most private sector workers fortunate to get sick leave, or vacations for that matter, the rule is use it or lose it. Seems more and more of the private sector is lumping sick leave and vacation together into a paid time off category. If you take sick time off, it comes out of the vacation side. So how important is sick leave? ThinkStock reported that sick days are costing the United States economy $84 billion a year. Now, a WallStreet.com special report listed the average days lost per month for 14 major professional categories. They did the survey of 94,000 Americans between January 2nd and September 10th of 2012. Now, you had to work 30 or more hours per week to make the cut for that one. Topping the list with most time in the office were physicians. The data for all of the groups was divided into 4 brackets. Now, the physician category included number of days missed, 0.24, cost of lost productivity, 250 million, unhealthy weight or chronic health conditions, 67.9%, and lastly, the job types in the survey group. This one included internists, obstetricians, and anesthesiologists. Number 13 included farmers, foresters, and fishers. These folks were happy about what they do and only missed 0.25 days per month. Now, I'm going to zip down the list, adding the cost of productivity to each category. Number 13, construction or mining, 1.3 billion. Installation, repairs, 1.5 billion. Sales, 6.8 billion. Managers / executives, $15.7 billion. Professionals, 24.4 billion. Manufacturing / production, 2.8 billion. School teachers, 5.6 billion. Transportation, 3.5 billion. Business owners, 2. Nurses, 33.7, all billions. Clerical and office workers, 8.1 billion. And the very worst days missed, service workers. That is, police officers, barbers, and waiters among them. This group also got the worst grade for physical health. Now, you know a bit about the folks not at work and what the effect on the economy might be. Now, I wondered who Governor Baker was really unhappy about. Public employee union members, I suppose. There are 40 million U.S. workers who do not have paid sick leave. That's 38% of the workforce. The public employees of this world have got paid sick leave in their contracts. Good deal for them. And some get to sell back unused leave when they retire. And that is what the good governor is unhappy about. Now, I decided to look at the contract between the NEA and the Portsmouth School Committee to see what it had to say about sick leave in my town. Like all such voluminous teacher union contracts, I had to sift through the pages until I found the leave section. Year 1 for a new teacher gets 12 days of sick leave, 15 days the next 2 years, and then it goes to 20 years. 20 days, I should say, 20 days, forever. And you can accumulate up to 170 days. That's almost an entire 180-day school year. Now, I know that the average American only takes 4.9 days off for sickness, much better than the 9.1 days the Brits take off. Why do the teachers get so many days off? Because they can. My school system is now making substitute teachers part of the permanent staff. Now, if the contract will allow you to stay home without a note from a physician, and you know that another teacher will be in the front of your students, great. But do they really do that kind of stuff? You bet. Rhode Island ranks #1 in America for teacher sick leaves. What do you think the number is? And that would be 21 days. You heard right. We lead the nation in missing teachers. You have to wonder if all those missing teachers aren't having an impact on the kids in the classrooms. They have to be. If a teacher is missing from the math class over 10% of the time, there has to be a consequence for everyone in the classroom. Thank you for watching, and God bless.